body we congregate in this council chamber. We pray for thy divine guidance, that we may do all things well, according to thy holy will. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Here.
Mr. Gabbard.
Here.
Mr. Geraci.
Here.
Mr. Kelsch.
Here.
Mr. DiNardo.
Here.
Mr. Thompson.
Here.
Mr. Braden.
Here. All members present. Item E, amendment of agenda. I have a request to amend the agenda. I would like to move item M, other requests to address council, to right after the minutes. We have a video presentation this evening, and also two gentlemen that would like to address council. Mr. Tracy.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda.
Motion by Mr. Geraci. Do I have a second? Mr. Braden?
Second.
Second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelsch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Item F, minutes of the previous meeting from the January 14th, 2020 meeting. You have those, all 14 pages. Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mr. Gabbard.
Make a motion that we receive and file as read.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard, second by Mr. Braden. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelsch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
And that brings us to requests to address council. The first person is Ms. Donnelly, and she would like to discuss the hometown takeover. How exciting!
First of all, it's nice to be back, but on this side. So, I wish Tyler Meyer could be here tonight, but he's at a Board of Education meeting. I got an email from Sharon Knoll, she's to blame for this, telling me about this contest that was called Hometown Takeover. And you know, you're all guys, so maybe you don't watch HGTV, but there is a program called Hometown. And it's about a couple from Laurel, Mississippi. He's real big and wears overalls, and he's a carpenter, and she's real short and has blonde hair, and she's an artist. And they try to fix up their hometown one house at a time. They see older homes that can be beautiful. And so I think what they're trying to do, HGTV is trying to do, is to maybe make them the next Chip and Joanna Gaines, since Chip and Joanna Gaines aren't doing it anymore. So they're taking Hometown on the road. And so they invited people to submit applications for them to come and take over your hometown. The qualifications were you had to have a population less than 40,000. You had to have a main road that goes through your town. You had to have older homes that were in need of repair. And maybe you want something of importance, of historical importance, or something that they could make over. So I'm on the board of Norwood Community Television, as is Mr. Miracle now. And so at that meeting I said to Tyler, I think we can do this. And he agreed that we could do it. And so we submitted an application. The deadline was Friday at midnight, and it was 11:47 when we finally uploaded it, but it got done. And so we had to do a paper application, and I'll read that to you, and then I would like to play the video for you. So this is the first time it's being seen anywhere. So our application says, tell us about your town. So if you ask folks why they live in Norwood, Ohio, they'll tell you these three things: location, older homes that are diamonds in the rough, and the strong sense of community. It takes a village applies here. Once a booming manufacturing town with a population of over 35,000, Norwood experienced a serious decline when the manufacturing industry went bust. Everyone expected the city to be annexed into neighboring Cincinnati. But Norwood has a strong history of pride and is home to hardworking middle-class folks. Population declined to below 20,000 when many of the Appalachian people who had moved to Norwood for jobs found themselves unemployed, and they moved to where there were jobs. Some of the workers stayed and raised families in the same values that they grew up with: good work ethic, family ties, and a sense of community. That spirit remains today. It takes a village certainly applies here. In an attempt to improve the quality of life, a volunteer group organized to ask residents and business owners what was important to them and how the city could be improved. It has led to the creation of a nonprofit organization called Norwood Together. They organize cleanups, plan community events, and write grants to improve our city. We are trying to reinvent ourselves and restore our once beautiful homes to their former glory. I invite you to watch our video to see exactly how we remain Norwood strong. Thank you, Aaron and Ben. And hopefully this is going to work. Is the TV on? It is on, right? The green?
Looks like it, yeah. 3 lights on.
Steve.
I think you're pushing the right click button.
Steve. He told me all I had to do was hit that.
Hi, Aaron and Ben. This is our hometown, Norwood, located in the southwest corner of Ohio, known as the Gem of the Highlands. Population 19,207, home to a proud working middle-class people. The city was incorporated from a village in 1902. Norwood has its own city hall, built in 1916, police and fire departments, and its own school system with 3 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high school. Most of the school buildings are over 100 years old and are undergoing renovation. We have 10 neighborhood parks. We value green space. We have grand old homes with wide tree-lined streets, as well as smaller homes that are in need of repairs. Despite the fact that Norwood is just slightly larger than 3 square miles, Norwood was once a manufacturing hub with a booming General Motors plant, U.S. Playing Card Company, LeBlanc Manufacturing, and Globornicky, just to name a few. Many Norwood families migrated from Kentucky and Tennessee to work in the factories, so there remains a strong Appalachian culture. With a population of 35,000, Norwood still retained that small hometown feel, with small shops and a market house along the main thoroughfare of Montgomery Road, known as the Pike. Today, the market house is empty, but would love to be renovated to its old glory. With the decline of manufacturing and the closure of most major industry, the population dropped to under 20,000 and the tax base declined. Everyone expected Norwood to fold and be annexed into Cincinnati, but that didn't happen. Despite cuts to city services, Norwood maintained all major departments and reinvented itself. Today, several mixed-use developments boast Class A office space, retail, and medical facilities where the manufacturing plants once stood. But we still maintain our small hometown feel, especially along Montgomery Road. In 2016, nearly 7 inches of rain fell in Norwood in less than 12 hours, flooding streets, homes, and businesses.
Everything down here is just scattered all over, as you can see. I mean, there is just nothing left to be saved.
Norwood Strong became the rallying cry. Neighbors helped neighbors. Volunteers were organized via social media, and everyone pitched in to make sure residents could get back to normal as soon as possible.
We remain Norwood Strong, and we invite you to visit Norwood, Ohio, our hometown.
give a huge shout out to James Bonsall. We found out Friday at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon that when we submitted a video, we had to have.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kathy Sabo, Superintendent of Norwood City School District and proud Norwood graduate. We're so excited for the 2019-2020.
We had to get signed release forms from every single person who was in that video. And so I got the guys at the table at McDonald's and all those people who were at the end of that video, including Mr. Gary and his wife, we needed to get releases from. And James spent his Friday night, while we were finishing editing, he finished his Friday night getting those releases. So I wanted to give a big shout out to Mr. Bonsall. And Tyler Meyer is exceptional. I'm sorry that he can't be here tonight. He did all of the editing and he laid down the music and made me talk like a fool, like, with all that silly expression. But, he said that's what's really important. So we've submitted it. And we'll see what happens. I just think that it's a video that if anybody, I think it tells the elevator story of the city of Norwood. And if anybody needs it, it's going to be up on YouTube. And we can certainly make edits to it. So if people need it to apply for grants or whatever, it'll be available. But we just wanted to share it with you first. So thank you.
Thank you, Dara. Next request to address council. If you gentlemen could come forward. Tom Jeffcott and Ben, I'm sorry, I'm not going to butcher your last name. Okay. They want to speak about the Cappy's beer wine permit. Gentlemen. Mr. Gabbard.
I'd like to make a motion before they even get started to go ahead and give them all the time that they need to present and speak, because I know it's probably going to take them more than just 5 minutes, with questioning and such. So.
Okay, motion by Mr. Gabbard to extend the time. Mr. Bonsall, second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yep.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes,
All members present voting aye to extend the time. Gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for having us. My name is Tom Jeffcott. I'm an attorney who represents a lot of bar and restaurant clients based in Columbus, Ohio, but I've been working with Ben here for a number of years, and we are here today to talk about the Cappy's location at 1919 Clinay. The way that I kind of want to structure this is I will talk briefly about the procedural history that we've had before council and what we have going on right now. And then I can turn it over to Ben to basically give you all a picture of what he's doing, what he has done with the space, and what he plans on doing to the space moving forward as well. And then opening it up for questions, if any of you have questions for me, for Ben, about anything. So back in August of last year, I had communicated with Keith, the law director, regarding a potential opportunity to transfer a D1 permit, which is an on-premise beer permit, into the Cappy's location. This was a Trex transfer application, which basically means we are allowed to take a permit from a different city and transfer it into Norwood. In the past, before the law changed, every city in Ohio had a quota for beer, wine, and liquor permits. You had to stick to that quota, and there was no way around it. The law changed, and then they basically made a pro-business move to allow cities to bring permits in if the city thought it was a good idea. So we had the opportunity to bring this D1 on-premise beer permit in, and it was discussed back in August with council, and there was not a vote taken, but it was pretty clear at the time that the council members, it seemed like it was a split room. We were not present at that meeting, but that's one of the reasons why we're here today, to basically bring that up again and to talk about any concerns that you may have with bringing in the on-premise beer permit. Aside from that, after that happened, I would say probably about 2 months ago, Cappy's moved up on the waiting list. So you can apply for permits as well, and they did apply for an on-premise beer permit and an on-premise wine permit. And we moved up on the waiting list, and now we became in process for that on-premise wine permit. I'm not sure when, but when that happens, the city is notified by the Division of Liquor Control that there's a business in town that's wishing to get this new permit issued, and the city does have the option to object to the issuance of that permit. It's my understanding that the city of Norwood did object to that permit. As of yesterday, I talked to the Division of Liquor Control. There has been no progress in actually setting a date for that objection hearing, but depending on how things go, they will set an objection hearing if you all feel that you still want to move forward with that hearing, and then we would have that hearing locally to determine if the division will accept that objection and refuse to issue the permit, or overrule that objection and indeed issue that wine permit to Cappy's. So those are the two main items that we want to talk about. And hopefully after hearing from us, council and the city is more comfortable with the idea of, one, allowing the D1 on-premise beer permit to be transferred into Norwood, and two, potentially to withdraw the objection to allow that wine permit to also be issued at the location. So, I'm going to hand it over to Ben now to give him the opportunity to talk to you about what he's done and what he wants to do moving forward. But if there are any questions at the end of Ben speaking about anything that I just talked about, the procedural aspects of the Trex transfer, how that impacts any other businesses, or what happens during an objection hearing and what would happen after that, I'm happy to answer those questions. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Ben.
Thanks, Ben. How's everybody doing tonight? Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. My name is Ben Capadagli. I'm the owner of Cappy's Wine and Spirits in Loveland, and also own Cappy's in Norwood. We've started a transformation process down there in Cappy's in Norwood. We started a few years ago. We've changed the entire product base. We've brought in over 300 types of wine. I don't know if anybody's been in there in the last 6 months. We've completely changed the setup on the inside. We got all the walls painted like Xavier Blue. We got the growler set up a couple years ago, and that's kind of what led us to want to do the pint license similar to what we do in Loveland, Ohio. To give you a little background on me and my history in Loveland, where we started. It was 12 years ago, actually, this past Saturday. We had our anniversary party. It was a small carry-out lawnmower shop, bait shop that was basically falling into the river. We've kind of transformed it into a landmark. If anybody would ever want to come out and see what we've done out there, and I could have anybody in Loveland, if anybody would ever want to talk to like the city manager or anybody on council. I have a great relationship. In 2018, we were the business of the year in the city of Loveland. In 2019, we won the Sims Township, Chamber of Commerce, Little Miami Sims Township Chamber of Commerce Community Advocate Award, which is a huge deal for our community service and charity events and things we run. All those things kind of came to fruition as we grew. We started as a liquor store, like I said, carry out. We added things over time as we were able to serve growlers and serve drinks. It allowed us to grow. It allowed us to offer a different aspect to our business that most people don't. It gives you that brewery feel in a sense. So those things allowed me to make improvements because it allowed us to grow our business, make more money, increase our margins. It's just outside of that realm of carryout. Down here in Norwood, we right now we're working on what we want to do with the outside. We have the permits for the bathrooms if we're able to get the D1, D2 license. So all that would be cleaned up on the inside. The inside looks great if you've not been in there. We have all the plans what we want to do with the outside and put awnings and get different plants and different things out there. We have all kinds of ideas. And like I said, I have a history of transforming places from these little, like I said, if you ever saw the place in Loveland 12 years ago, I don't even know. I can't even explain it. So, and at the same time with the D1, D2 license, I understand some of the concerns. For us, we have concerns with being on a college campus and that, but we have the full ID machine, and we're not trying to be like a bar. We close at 11 o'clock on weekends. We close at 10 during the weeks. That's not something that's going to change. I'm 41. I'm not getting younger. I'm not trying to be out there all night long. We're trying to enhance the experience. We're trying to make it something that's different. Cappy's doesn't just have like a following. Like if you're in craft beer, people regionally and even nationally know about us. We get a lot of accolades. you know, we really love to work with the community. Like I said, that really came about through us being able to serve drinks and really, I mean, kind of create this atmosphere of community in our store. And so that's why we're trying to do what we want to do. I would love to answer any questions that anybody has to me to the best of my ability. And like I said, if anybody would ever if there's people who are concerned or want to talk more down at this location, and I could point things out or come see what I've done in Loveland, I would love to set up a time to talk with you even further if that's necessary too. So I really open it up to any questions anybody has for me. Sorry about my voice. Appreciate you taking the time to listen.
Yeah, I've actually been to the Loveland one. It is really nice out there on the side of it. Where would the space go in the Norwood location? Because it feels a little bit wedged between two properties. Would it be kind of in front towards the street, or are you going behind the building?
Everything would be inside.
Okay.
So like everything would be inside. Like we haven't even. So like that's what happened in Loveland. So like I try to have big ideas, but take steps to get to those big ideas, because like I don't have investors in that. I don't have different people, you know, like any money that comes from me, and banks don't really like loaning to like convenience store, gas station, liquor store, bar type places. So what we did is, like in Loveland, we didn't build the patio at first. We actually just served drinks inside. And then what happened was, it was like, I mean, that in Loveland is set up differently. We have much more room inside here in Norwood, like actual space. And we had nowhere for anybody to sit. We didn't even have one seat out in Loveland. So we built a little patio out front in May of 2000, I believe 16. And in November, we tore it down to build a bigger patio because it just warranted it. The city at the time, I mean, Loveland's grown tremendously, if anybody hasn't been out here in that period of time. So it's kind of like, I mean, my first step, I mean, before I ever thought about anything outside, I mean, there's nowhere to go out front. I mean, that's impossible because that's the parking spots. And I mean, really, my vision right now is an internal type place until like the next step would be, until the next step came along, if it came along.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this is probably a question he would be able to answer. Have you looked into what the impact of having an additional Trex into the city of Norwood?
Yes. So
as far as the devaluation of.
Yes, and I believe that was brought up at the last meeting. Now, I want to be clear that Trexing a permit into Norwood does not affect the quota whatsoever. So I've got a printout of the current quota for D1 and D2 licenses. And this is based on population. For every 2,000 people, there is one permit. So based on the current population numbers, which these also may change with the census coming up too, but there are 10 D1 permits and 10 D2 permits available within the city. Now, all of those are at quota. 10 issued permits for D2s, and actually D1 permits are over quota. There are 11 issued D1 permits in Norwood. And that means that the population dropped at some point likely, and that's why we are actually in the negative for D1 permits. But adding a permit with the Trex system does not change that quota. It really does not devalue the existing permits within the city, because it's really up to the city. If the city believes that they would like to support the business and allow them to transfer a permit in, that's great. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all of a sudden people will be able to bring in permits from everywhere. The city is the gatekeeper. So, and looking at the quota list as well, I see that there have been 5 instances, it looks like, where D1 permits have been Trexed in. So in the past, there have been other situations where Trexes have occurred in Norwood, 5 times with the D1 permits and 6 times with the D2 permits. So that number changes, but the actual quota itself does not change. And I've not seen any other instances where permits are dramatically devalued based on one instance of a permit being Trexed in.
Can you, just for the watching citizens, can you just give a short explanation of what D1 is and what D2 is?
Absolutely. D1 is on-premise beer consumption. So basically, it's a pint license, like Ben was talking about. If you go into a bar, restaurant, you can have a beer there. Versus a carry-out permit, which Cappy's currently has a carry-out permit, but they also have the D8 permit, which allows for growler fills and tastes. So we would be expanding on the existing permit, which is a carry-out plus growler permit, to allow patrons to come in and have a beer inside the business and sit and socialize. If a student wants to come in and study over a beer, they could do that as well. D2 is on-premise wine. So currently Cappy's has the carry-out wine permit. This would be enhancing that, changing that to allow on-premise consumption for wine. And interestingly enough, cider is also covered under that D2, C2 permit. It's classified as a wine, not necessarily a beer. So it's wine and cider.
Yeah, so I had two questions. So with a Trex license or permit, then what happens if the owner no longer wants to own the Trex permit? You said it doesn't affect the existing ones. How does it get transferred?
So at that point, if an owner decides to close the business and they have that permit, then they can transfer that permit to another location within Norwood, or they could transfer it out of Norwood, or they could cancel the permit altogether.
Does it take that same Trex form to transfer it to another location in Norwood?
It would not take the same Trex form, no.
So it's just a traditional transfer?
At that point, yes.
Okay. And then the second question is, so I guess there were issues at that location in the past where I think the settlement was that the owner, who owned Donna's or Cappy's at the time? Who owned that when it was Donna's?
Yeah, I've owned it for years. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess my question is, I know that it's improved. I've been in there a couple of times in the past year to buy beer. I guess are there steps being taken, or are there things that you've done that will prevent what happened before happening again?
Oh, well, I think what happened before is we were dealing with liquor, and that was something that when we didn't quite know what we were dealing with. We got that liquor. That was the first time I dealt with like a liquor store. This isn't like a liquor permit I'm trying to do. Like I said, that's why I'm giving the copy of what I did out in Loveland and what we're trying to do to rebrand the whole place from here. We basically given the death penalty. And, I feel like we're coming back from that, and that's why we're trying to change the face of it, and that's why I'm coming to you guys to try to make a change. If you really want it to be different, I have to have an opportunity to be able to do it in a different way, because otherwise it's just going to be a college carryout, and I can do the best I can, but I'm not going to be able to turn it into that Cappy's Gold. And like I said, I have a great history, and you can talk to people all over my industry. Alcohol, you can talk to people in Loveland and Claremont County. We go out of our way to be a part of the community, the schools, the police department. I think we have a good relation with the police department and that in Loveland. We haven't had any problems there. So, that's really what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to change the face of it, but with what I have, I can only do so much. And like I said, that's why we're changing the inside, and that's what we're working on the outside. We just haven't been able to paint right now because of the weather and that. But, that was the whole kind of thing, was to kind of come up with a whole new sign, get our whole new logo, and really just try to make it a great place. I think a lot of those problems were alleviated when the liquor left, probably almost overnight. So that's, from my personal experience from being there, that's what seemed to happen. Our customer base went down 90% overnight. So, so those people aren't in front. That's just not the same. That's not really the same type of thing we're even trying to do, because we weren't serving drinks at all back then. Now we do sell, so you can do 4 2-ounce samples at Cappy's, and you can do the growlers. That's part of the D8 license. Like I said, that gives it a nice thing, and I do understand the concerns, and that's why I'd love to meet with anybody to actually show you down there. It's hard for a guy like me to stand in front of a room I mean, I'll be honest with you, I haven't had to do this like really ever. But if I'm at my place and I can show you what I'm doing, and I can take you to my other place and I can show you what I've done there, and I can have you talk to, my son's a type 1 diabetic. I mean, we're one of the leading fundraisers in Cincinnati for juvenile diabetes. I mean, we do huge Alzheimer's fundraisers every year. Randy Rico, you'll see us all over the news, the Channel 5 weather lady. Ken Brew, everyday customer at Cappy's. You'll hear him talk about Cappy's. I've been on his radio show 5 or 6 times when he fills in. I mean, these are people who are respected in the community, who are friends of mine. I could definitely have letters of recommendation, like I said, from anybody in Loveland, city managers, fire chief, police chief. I mean, I haven't asked them, but I'm pretty sure I would get that. And I would love to talk to anybody more and like show you my ideas and that. But we are limited by margins in money, and because you make more money when you sell draft beer and that. I mean, and you bring more people in and you're able to grow your business. And then, so that's what I'm trying to do. I'm really trying to make it Cappy's Norwood, its own place, like kind of like a Cappy's Sundry store is how I always thought of it, except unique. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's what that's what we're trying to just change the complete face of that. And I think we've done a really good job. I mean, that's almost 3.5 years ago now. We've had 0 issues since then too. And that's what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to change it by making it different.
And if I can piggyback off of that just quickly, regarding relationships with police. Back in August, I was in communication with the chief of police and actually got his sign-off, essentially consenting to that, subject to council's approval. So that's actually one of the reasons why we didn't necessarily anticipate the need to come before council, because we basically had to sign off on with the chief of police, and I was not anticipating any additional questions and concerns from council, but I haven't followed up with the chief as of today. I did back in August, and to my knowledge, nothing has changed as far as the police's opinion on the matter. And like Ben had said, he hasn't had any issues or anything like that in recent months.
Mr. Geraci, you had a question?
Yeah. How many employees do you anticipate having?
Well, so that's something actually, I'm glad you asked, because that's actually something I meant to bring up. One of the things, if we do this, we would have to add at least like one person who ran it. You know what I mean? Who like managed it, has experience. I have a couple people in mind. I have a lot of connections. What we've really done is amped up the wine game. So one of the things, we have a couple wine sommeliers that we've been working with that like actually just kind of advised us on how to set the store. We've redone it here over the last 6 months on the inside. So like if you go in, you'll notice like where our wine is and how things are set up, and they really helped us set up. So we would have to add, it would bring at least one employee that I would have to bring in to run it, and then from there I don't overpromise anything until it grows. In Loveland, we're a little convenience store now, and I believe we have 12 employees out of it. So but that didn't happen overnight either. It took 4 or 5 years for us to get there.
That's kind of why I asked anticipation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think if things went well, I think we would add 5 or 6, good jobs. That's another thing. We part of the community advocate award we won is our relationships with our staff in the community too. So we have a lot. It's really important to establish that community relationship. I understand that, and I think maybe because my son lives out on the east side and I'm out in Loveland more, maybe I missed an opportunity to make that relationship with Norwood, but that's what I'm trying to make now. And I really, I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I think we're pretty good at it, and I think it would be a real positive for the city of Norwood, and I think we could be, we could be a destination. We are a destination in Loveland, and people always say if you were anywhere close to me, I'd come to you. I get people to drive out to Loveland, Ohio. It's outside the 275 loop, so it should be a lot easier to get people to drive to Norwood. So that's so I would think over the next 3-4 years we would add 4 or 5 solid full-time jobs, and if we were able to get this to go through, we'd be adding somebody immediately.
One more.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
If you happen to take off with something like this,
yes, sir,
and you seem like you're going to outgrow that little storefront there, would you look to be moving to a bigger building?
Wow, I never thought of that. I mean, I own the property there. In Loveland, we were in a small building, and I'm kind of the field of dreams mentality. Like, if you build it, they will come. I mean, I guess if the opportunity was there and it was affordable, you know, I mean, that's really like that would come down to financing in that. I think. I mean, I honestly hadn't thought of that before at all. I mean, I would always be willing to move somewhere if it made sense for my business. If the move was a financial, I don't like to rent property though, so then I'd have to find a property that I bought, because if I put money into making something unique, at least I don't want to like just have it sitting there when I'm gone, you know, if that makes sense. But I mean, I'm always open to possibilities, but that I did not think of at all, to be honest with you. But I'm not opposed. Like I said, it's the evolution of the business. Whatever we can do to make it better and different is what I want to try to do, as long as it works.
Mr. Gabbard.
I will say that I did reach out to Chief Kramer and to Mark Reeves from the building department and then the law department. I did hear back from Chief Kramer and Mark Reeves, both saying that they had no issues. They've not had any issues, and things have been good. So they have no objections, which is good. That's good news to hear. And then I would like to maybe go through the chair to the law department and see if they have any comments.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've not, I'm unaware of any objections from building, police, fire, tax over the last 3 years. I think council's concerns were based on the activities that led to getting the last, getting the nuisance action filed. And that was, I think, was their main concern. But again, the owners didn't come to council. That always factors into it when somebody's asking for something. So this is a good discussion to have.
Good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. So there's a renovation going on in that corner right there, and I think there's a real opportunity there, and I'm pulling for you. I'm hoping that you get this through, and so the best case scenario, and you're successful. Can you tell us what your plans are exterior wise? Like, do you go over that? I know you said awnings, or is there?
Yeah, so like we haven't, because I'm not exactly sure coding that, but what we've been talking about, like, so we took the inside, we just painted all the inside, we did all the shelves, we got the whole store reset. Like I said, we had a level 2 wine sommelier help us set it up. She's a good friend of mine. And she really gave us a lot of ways like on how to do that. So on the outside, we have a couple different ideas, like maybe playing it like, put a blue X across, you know what I mean? Get the facade and a blue X with the white, and then like have a nice awning. Get that. Like I said, man, we got the death penalty, and that Cappy sign was just us getting something up that got changed the name. Now I can afford to put a new sign up. I'm sure there's zoning. I'm sure there's zoning things on the sign, but so those are the types of things we want to do. But it's really going to be hard for me to do if I don't get the D1, D2 license. I'm just going to be honest with you.
I think you got a real opportunity on that corner. That's
I agree.
A great place, so I'm really pulling for you. So
yeah, no, I agree, and so like that's what we'd love. We even heard, and I don't know for sure that there might be some beautification opportunities with the city of Norwood. I don't know if that's possible or not. I thought my uncle, he had been looking at some things that maybe you guys did some things with that in the past. But we like in Loveland, I have somebody that comes and does my flowers once a quarter in front of the store, and they take they make seasonal, like these huge beautiful displays. These are the types of things that when you're able to grow your business and create higher margins, you're able to put money into the store. I can put money in the store at a much slower pace where we're at, but if I start to have these kind of things, and I know. And I have previous experience with this. I know where to put my money and kind of how to put it and try to make it work best. And I agree. I want to change the whole look. It's just like I said. Most bars that have all these investors in that. I don't. It's just me, And so for me to take $5,000, that's a huge. It might not seem like a lot of money, but it is, And if the sign doesn't work out or the license doesn't come through, then it's like, wow, like hopefully I can get that back. But I feel like I really know what we can do, and I feel like changing the facade of that building and really, getting some flowers and that up there. We got the concrete done out front. I mean, I just think those types of things, you put it all together, like you said, with the corner coming up and with the development of Xavier across the street. I mean, when I bought that property however many years ago now, 2007 or 2008, we all know what it looked like, right? Like around there, Norwood Cafe, right? So, it's just amazing where we've come. And we want to be part of that, and we've been a part of that in Loveland, like I said, where they've come from. Like, we had a feed mill across from us 10 years ago. Now we got all these apartments and all these restaurants and bars and little boutique shops, and so I really think we can fit into the vibe of the revitalization of Norwood, especially down there by Xavier's campus where we are. And I think Cappy's fits by a college campus too. And with downtown, we're going to draw people from Hyde Park. Dutch's and Hyde Park closed. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but like those are people I can bring to Norwood if I have an opportunity. But I need the license. It's the truth. We have a social media presence that's through the roof. And we really interact with people. And so these type of things, like if I have this opportunity, I can change the way the place looks. There's no reason, honestly. A D1 license is more of a pain in the butt if you're not willing to do it the right way. Serving drinks is not easy. It's not fun. It's not my hobby. It's my job, and I'm pretty good at it, but I take it very seriously. And to make money and to do it right, you have to be really on top of it, and you have to really be willing to think outside the box and control and try to control your environment. And we're very good at that. We've never had any issues. I've been serving drinks for 5 years, and I have never had a single issue. I've never had to break up a fight. I've never had to call the police. And that's a pretty amazing thing. So those are the type of things I think we can do, and I think we can help be a huge part of this revitalization if we have the opportunity. And even if not, we're going to continue to work hard and continue to try to make it look better. It'll be a slower pace, but no matter what, we're going to continue to try to be better and be a part of the community the best we can. So, sorry.
Anything else? Mr. Monsell, sir.
I guess it sounds like, I don't know when we consider what we want to do, if we do anything, but it sounds like I guess we have a few options, right? We could, give approval for the president of council or the clerk of council to sign the Trex form. We could make a motion and say we don't want anybody in the city signing the Trex form, that we don't want it to happen. We could refer it to a committee. We could delay it until the next council meeting to give nearby property owners and residents a chance to chime in. These options are out there, so I just wanted to let you all know that. I don't have a specific course of action that I really feel strongly on, but curious what you all thought.
Mr. Thompson.
I wouldn't mind giving residents an opportunity to chime in or to comment on this, and just the fact that this is the first time you've been able to come.
Great.
We of course don't have anybody here who could ask questions or something, so I would
agree with that. Yeah.
I would suggest, I don't know if it goes in committee or if we just maybe try it next council meeting or something, but just to give an opportunity for residents to ask questions if there are any.
And if I could chime in on that too, a gentleman who is on ward council in Ward 2 is a friend of mine from college. His name is John Moore. I don't know if any of you know him. I know Eric. I spoke with Eric earlier, and he's familiar with John. I notified John of this probably a couple weeks ago, and he had said that the ward council had just met, but he was going to look to see if he could get any type of a listserv to get the word out. As of tonight, I have not heard any additional feedback from Ward 2, but a member of ward council is on notice, and once again, we would welcome any feedback from community members or other business members as well. Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Monsell?
Yeah, so, I kind of want to get the feedback of the economic development chair on this one. Do you want to see it in your committee and want to have a hearing on it, or do you feel like it would be, through the chair if you don't mind, but do you feel like it would be better just to move it to the next council meeting?
No, I was thinking the same thing, but I thought we would have to do that in new business instead of put it in the committee during then. But I don't know if we can do that now or not.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a thought. What if we, because you want to hear back from the residents, what if we put it on the agenda for next meeting and call a public meeting during the meeting for anyone who wants to come and pledge against or speak against it or for it, and it'll be on the agenda for next meeting, and then we can give this guy a chance if no one, I mean, if the police department or the fire department don't really have any objections. I think that's what Mr. Moore stated. Let's put it on the agenda. Let's put it on the agenda. And give the residents a chance to speak.
Mr. Gabbard?
Can I go through the chair to the fire chief and see if he has a comment
Yes,
at
sir.
all? Yay, nay, or?
We have had no issues with that, and we've been code compliant, so we would have no objections to it. We don't speak to the except for what responds for criteria for code enforcement. We have no objections for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Braden?
I'd like to make a motion to place this on the agenda for our meeting, which would be, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
25th, February 25th?
25th?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd
like to second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Braden to put on the agenda for February 25th, second by Mr. Kelch.
To have a public hearing.
Put it on the agenda and have a public hearing. Is that
Yes,
what
sir.
you're
Thank
saying?
you, Mr. Gabbard. Yes, Mr. President. Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, so we will put this on the agenda February 25th and have a public hearing.
So should I just show up same time, like on February 25th? Is that correct?
7:30.
Cool. All right, excellent. I appreciate you guys taking the time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Next on the agenda is request to address council on agenda items. We don't have any, so we move to item H, reports of standing committees of council. We have Law, Ordinance, and Human Resources Committee report. Mr. Geraci.
To the Honorable Council, City of Norwood, Ohio, we, the Committee of Law, Ordinance, and Human Resources, to whom was referred, had a discussion to amend Ordinance 919.01 through 919.17, and/or a discussion of the current ordinance with Safety Service Director Murphy. We also discussed amending the standing rules of council to move public comments. Let's see. Begged leave to submit the following report we discussed with Safety Service Director Murphy, how oversight was being handled, and found out that the streets were being opened without permits prior to his involvement. He now handles those permits, and amendments were placed on hold for the time being. Committee agreed to amend council rules to move public comments toward the beginning of the meeting, and we'll present this at the February 25th meeting. So essentially what we're looking to do is we will, just like tonight, we will move the public comments towards the beginning of the meeting so that any residents that would like public comments can make their comments early.
Motion?
Motion to receive and file.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard, second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is just a quick note. My name is spelled wrong on this paper. If whoever's in charge. So I can't really vote for this. Anyway, thank you.
We'll make sure we correct that. Anything else, Mr. Gabbard?
Yeah, I'd like to go through the chair to ask Mr. Geraci if he could just elaborate on what the discussion to amend Ordinance 919.01-919.017.
Mr. Geraci.
Just reading this, if somebody hears this, they're like, well, that didn't tell me anything. Just So you can, so the public will just understand what we actually talked about.
So what we had discussed was looking to strengthen the ordinance in order to hold accountability for the companies that do open up the streets with the cuts within the roadway. If you see the vertical cuts parallel with the road or perpendicular with the road that go to the houses, apparently the old administration was not requiring permits to cut into it, which didn't require anybody in the city to check the work and verify that it was done properly. According to Safety Service Director Murphy, he is now currently, which I've seen several times, going out to inspect not just openings within the street and sidewalks, but telephone poles that have been placed in wrong positions, crosswalks that are not painted or heat treated properly to code. He is doing what the ordinance actually says that needs to be done. So at this time, strengthening the ordinance is something that we can put on hold for right now until we see a little bit more time, as time goes by, how this ordinance is being followed. And that's essentially what we had discussed, was what that ordinance was, you know, there are permit fees, there is a permit schedule set up on how permits are supposed to be brought in, and they just weren't for the past who knows how many years, which has been corrected from my understanding.
Any further discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
I'd just like to elaborate just a little bit further. Mr. Murphy is doing a great job as far as his whole point was we got to get the word out. The word meaning you do need to let City Hall know what's going on, get proper permits for opening and closing our streets, and doing work on curbs and sidewalks and these utility poles. He advised us that they do have a meeting scheduled with Duke to talk about some of these poles. They were flabbergasted, quote, flabbergasted, when they shared what some of the subcontractors and how they've been placing these poles. They were shocked. They couldn't believe that was going on, and it actually went up a couple leadership levels. And so Mr. Murphy said that they do have a meeting scheduled to kind of discuss those, which is good. I put it out on my social media. I'm hoping that some of the others do as well. But we want to encourage all businesses and our residents to let City Hall know if there's something going on that you observe. If you know you see a utility company out there working, just let them know so they can have somebody just swing by or look in and make sure that we know that they're supposed to be there. And that way we can make sure that the work is done properly, and the site is left and you know like it was, or even better than when they showed up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gabbard. Any further discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you so much. One of the concerns that we did talk about was, I think Mr. Murphy was, I mean, he was only in the role for 3 weeks at that point, right? I mean, but there was concerns that he had about there not being an ordinance in place to make everything back to normal, like back exact to the position that it was in, that there wasn't the stuff. And we were able to point out at the meeting, well, look, there is something 919.17 that has that in place. You know, just want to make sure that it's known that the ordinances are there. They just need to be enforced, as he said. And I know it was talked about permit fees and stuff. And you know, I think last year we had like $3,000 in street opening permit fees. You know, there's some years that it was $140,000. That's when Duke was doing all the gas lines. So it'll be good to make sure that the permits are getting filed and that we do get whatever fees are described in the ordinance for the future, just because it does do damage to our streets when they cut into them. So, thanks for holding that meeting. Thank you.
Any further discussion? We have a motion by Mr. Gabbard, second by Mr. Thompson, to receive and file the Law, Ordinance, and Human Resources Committee report. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Breeden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Item I, third readings of ordinances and resolutions. We don't have any this evening. Item J, second readings of ordinances and resolutions. J1, an ordinance repealing the prohibition against the keeping or harboring of honeybees and the declaration that any beehive within the city of Norwood is a public nuisance and regulating the keeping and harboring of honeybees within the city of Norwood. Mr. Bonzo.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we have the second reading of this ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall, second by Mr. Gabbard.
As discussion.
Any discussion?
Yeah. I think one of the reasons we wanted to just have the first reading was to get that feedback if there was any. Did anyone hear anything positive or negative or any feedback?
No.
Okay. I didn't really accept a bunch of thumbs up via social media networks, so I think it's worth just saying that, you know, my very linear view saw a few, but only support. But it wasn't like a massive number, but they were supportive.
Any further? Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. So is there, I appreciate that comment, Mr. DiNardo. Is there any, do we wish to maybe have the second and third reading tonight? And maybe just get that off the agenda? Is there something that we might be able to do that?
I think that's what I was trying to ask. Like, is there
I
a
like
reason,
that.
you know?
I like that. Can I make a motion? Or, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean,
We're in discussion right now. Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you,
Do it my
Mr.
way.
Yeah, well, I will just say this. I did tell Emily Franzen, she had asked about, they had asked about coming tonight. I was like, well, we didn't have any questions at the last meeting. I was like, I don't know if you necessarily need to come tonight. I think she was planning on coming at the last one in February. I mean, we can definitely do the readings tonight if we want to. I think there's no issue with waiting. I mean, the prime hive planting or hive starting season is April, so I think we're good either way. But you know, I guess it's up to you all.
I think you had spelled out that the timing was perfect with the second and third reading when you introduced this, Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah. So I think we're probably good, but I appreciate you thinking about it. So.
Mr. Kelch?
I did have one resident reach out that was kind of really against it. Other than that, nobody really reached out to speak about it. And the reason being that she's allergic to bee stings, or bees, and if they sting her. So one question I wanted to ask is, has there been any talk about in cities that have passed something like this, has there been anything like more stings reported than usual after passing this or not? I think is a question worth asking.
Mr. Gabbard?
I believe Emily, when her and her husband and the other gentleman was here during the committee meeting, were discussing that. They said that the majority of bee stings are not from honeybees. They're actually from bumblebees, from wasps, from yellow jackets, from those type. The honeybees they're workers. Their whole job is to get in and out of that hive, go get their pollen, and get right back to the hive. So the only occasions that somebody would is if there's interference with them coming and going from their hive, meaning you're blocking their way, and because when they sting, that's their life. That's it. They die.
Yeah.
So they give their life for their work to protect their hive. So the majority of is the way it was explained to me, and from talking to other beekeepers that I know, the majority of stings are not from the actual honeybees. But that's a good question. We can ask her at the next meeting when she's here.
Yeah, that's why I asked. I remember them saying that, but my question more was, with the increased number of bees around, is there an increased amount of stings is what I wanted to find out.
Good question.
Any further discussion? So the motion on the floor is by we had a motion by Mr. Bonsall, second by Mr. Gabbard for the second reading. Do you want to go ahead and read it?
Do we have to call
I'm sorry.
roll?
Call the roll. I'm sorry.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, motion passes. Item J2, and
I think we need to do the reading.
did you do second? Now we do the second.
Right.
Forgive me.
You're good. You're good. You're good.
One step ahead of me.
An ordinance repealing the prohibition against the keeping or harboring of honeybees and the declaration that any beehive within the city of Norwood is a public nuisance, and regulating the keeping and harboring of honeybees within the city of Norwood.
Perfect.
Let's see. So that moves us on to item J2, an ordinance authorizing a contract with Hamilton County, Ohio to provide its services in disposing of city surplus personal property. May I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Thompson.
We would have the second reading of the ordinance.
Second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Please read the second reading.
An ordinance authorizing a contract with Hamilton County, Ohio to provide its services in disposing of city surplus personal property.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Moving on to item K, introductory readings of ordinance resolutions. Item K1, ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a water system analysis agreement with the City of Cincinnati and declaring an emergency. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Braden?
I'd like to ask if there's a brief, like maybe overview of this resolution that someone might have for us. Mr. Mayor, Law Department, either one.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. And Mr. Braden, you know that back in September, when you were on council, you guys approved, and we had a discussion about that, requesting an ordinance to be put in place for this proposal from Greater Cincinnati Waterworks, and this is a continuation of the work that the previous council did. This is that proposal. This is a proposal to provide engineering services and basically an analysis of our water system, our water distribution system, including the water towers that will potentially either need to be replaced or just eliminated. So this is a very in-depth engineering study that will give us some guidance on making financial decisions for the future, on maintenance decisions in the future, and how we really go forward with the distribution system. The scope of this shows an outline of all the different work that will be completed over this period of time. We're probably talking about 8 months worth of engineering work here on this. So it's going to be expensive to get it done. It's necessary. It's necessary for a couple different reasons. It's necessary to maintain the system, but it's also necessary to meet some of the requirements that the Ohio EPA has put in place. And so we really have to, we're not in a position where we can say, we're not going to do that this year, let's wait, because the Ohio EPA could come down on us in a couple of different situations. So we have to move forward with this. The outlay of funds will come out of the water fund, and it's not a big check that we have to do all at once. They'll be invoicing us as they move along, as they make as we work through the process. And then the term of this agreement is for 1 year, so it'll all be completed within 1 year. I think really they're looking at 6 to 8 months to have all this information completed. It's going to take a lot of work from our crews, from our water department people, providing information to them also, and working with them on different things. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. Thank you.
What's your pleasure, gentlemen? Mr. Thompson?
Question, is this a time sensitive? I know that we've asked to declare emergency on this, but I understand that this is important. It is something we've been working on for several months. Do we need to have all 3 readings tonight?
I would recommend you have all 3 readings. This is really not an ordinance that you would look at and say, well, we need public input. This is doing the business of the city. So it's not something where we would say, well, let's do one reading now and then we'll have a public hearing and let them tell us whether we should do it or not. This is the experts coming in to tell us how to do this properly. So I would recommend, doing it in 3. We get started on it, sign it, and move forward.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yeah, actually, I appreciate you coming in, and I think sometimes in the past, I guess, 40 days that I've been on it, we've moved things as an emergency, and we've been kind of told that everything's an emergency. In this case, this does feel very much like the appropriate word. So I'm appreciating that we're kind of, when you ask, like, is there a sense of urgency? I think yes. And so I'd support doing all 3 readings for that reason. This third-party analysis is exactly the type of thing we should be doing. So,
Mr. Braden?
I have a question. It's about the area in which the water towers are in. I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but there was a test done about the erosion of that hill that the water towers are on. Do we know anything about that? Supposedly there was some drilling done and some sort of measuring mechanism to see how far that hill's pushed or is pushing. Do we know anything about that, or is that maybe no, not yet?
I don't know anything about that. I could question the city engineering, the people who do that, but I'm not familiar with it.
I'm sorry. So anyway, yeah.
And that's a stormwater or sewer issue, not a water issue.
Understood.
As well.
Understood that.
Yeah.
We're talking about that hill there, so.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Mr. Kelch?
Yeah, I would just like to go in and support this. I think it's a very important step in the betterment of our water system and the towers and all that. We need to get it looked at, and I think this is where we need to go with it.
Mr. DiNardo, you had your hand up, sir.
I just wanted to wait until everyone discussion because I was going to make a motion. So I'd like to
We need
continue
to
the
make a
discussion.
motion before we discussion. We need, we shouldn't be having discussion on this without a motion.
Make it. Do I have a motion? Motion by Mr. Thompson.
I would move we have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
A second?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo? Any further discussion? Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I mean, my only hang-up is, again, it's potentially up to $235,000. It's a lot of money to be spending, and I know that it sounds like there's going to be some really good work that's done. It's unfortunate that the system wasn't better managed in the past, much to council's frustration, the previous council's frustration. One of the options, so Mayor Cranley had written an email to the Safety Service Director, Mayor Williams, and basically had laid out some different options for how they could potentially help us. I think this is one of the options. One of the other options was them loaning us, for a fee, but essentially an operator of record that could, an experienced engineer from their side that could come here and run our system for us. But I think in the meantime, they could have done some planning and some items that potentially, we're going to be paying for here. Was that ever discussed as an option, or if I could, through the chair, was that ever discussed as an option when you were considering what to do, as mayor, what to do about the water system?
In this, they state that this is going to give the city of Cincinnati the ability to look at what it would take for them to potentially take over the water system. So that was something that has been alluded to in years past. The city of Cincinnati won't take over the water system because our water system's too antiquated. And I don't know that that's true or false, but within this report, they will have the information required to make a determination and to help council to provide the information to the administration and to provide it to council to make a determination on that. I think what you're talking about is we could bring a person in from their office that will put together a plan, and maybe in 5 years we might have a plan together, but he's going to piecemeal it together. I would not be an advocate of piecemealing a plan on the system at this time. I would be an advocate of doing the plan and getting it to us in 8 months and making a decision so that next year we all feel that we have good information and we know the proper steps to go in 12 months, not going out 60 months. So that would be my push of going ahead and moving forward with this at this time.
Mr. Tracy.
No, I'm not a fan of reading 150, 200 pages worth of paperwork, but I'm hoping that looking through this, we get a very detailed plan for the money that we look to spend on it. Hopefully it lays out a couple options versus just one option, but I'm hoping I'm going to take it for what it's worth on this piece of paper that we're going to get a decent amount of information out of this.
Mr. Gabbard, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. I got several questions, if I could, to go through the chair to the mayor. First of all, do we know who this Arcadius is? The consult firm that the Cincinnati Waterworks. I mean, that's who they're wanting to use. Is this Arcadius Consulting? Do we know who they are?
I do not personally know anybody who works for Arcadius. I don't know water engineering firms that provide water studies.
Right.
I think that's sort of a specialty. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're going through Greater Cincinnati Waterworks to do this. So we don't. We are leaning on their experience and knowledge and their terms. So because nobody at the city of Norwood has the qualifications to put this together and really to vet who's the best engineering firm to give us a water study.
Mr. Gabbard.
Understood. I appreciate that. I would encourage that we maybe just look just so we kind of know who they are as we progress through that. I mean, we're going to be paying a lot of money out for that. My next question is, last year there was some issues with the water fund, and maybe sometimes this was not supposed to be there, or it was supposed to be there, or whatever. I just want to make sure in this in this particular agreement, they're going to be looking at that. So do we have all our ducks in a row with the water fund, and to make sure that as we go through and they start looking at, kind of our water fund and how that's set up and all that, all our ducks are in a row, just so we're ahead of that game and we don't look like fools? So, I mean, what I'm saying is the water fund and all that, are we all clear on that from the mistakes that were going on last year?
I think our accounting services is not something that they're going to be looking at in an analysis of our water fund system. They will look at the money that should be coming in, the potential for increases in those areas, but they're not going to look at our accounting and make sure that we're not putting water fund into a stormwater fund that should be going into. So that's something that the auditor's office, the state auditor's office, and our internal people have to get that in order. This is something, this goes back when you talk about the revenues from the water that is going through our distribution system. There's a huge amount of loss, and is that through seepage or water mains that are broke underground, or is that through having water meters that have been in place for, in some of these homes 80 years? And a water meter, when it doesn't work, it slows down and does not read the total amount going through it. So it's typically not speeding up and charging you more, it's charging you less, and you're getting the benefit of that. So they will look at those things and potential loss factors, and they would make recommendations on improvements that should be made to the system in those areas.
Okay. Mr. Gabbard.
We just, last council meeting, got communication from the Safety Service Director about a water rate increase. That's just us passing that along from the city. I mean, have we been able to communicate that to the citizens, or how are we communicating that to the citizens? And then also, how will we communicate this agreement so people don't think that water increase is to pay for this? They're two totally separate things, have nothing to do with each other. The rate increase that the Safety Service Directors just told us about, at the last meeting, was strictly just passing on what the city charges us. So I guess the first question is, how are we communicating that to the people, just so they know, hey, this is why your rates are and this is what the deal is? And then how will we communicate about this particular agreement to people as they have questions?
Well, typically the water increase is put on, is noted, it's verbiage that's put on the water bill. So I would suspect that is how Safety Service Director Murphy is taking care of it this year to inform people of it. That's how it's been done on all the other years. When you talk about this plan and putting and doing it, I mean, there's no public hearings. There's nothing going out there that says this is what we're doing. We're communicating it right now to all of you. We're communicating it to anybody who cares to watch this stuff either online or where they watch it. These documents are at City Hall. They can come and take a look at them if they want to. But this is operational. This is the operation of the water system. These type of analyses and studies and engineering things should be done on a regular basis. This shouldn't be like, oh my gosh, the city's doing an engineering study. You do engineering studies all the time. You do work like this as a course of business. So this is not something that we would really put out on, we hope to have a Facebook page up there soon. I mean, it's not really something we would put out that way. So,
Mr. Gabbard?
In here, it talks about our insurance and making sure that we have insurance at a certain level. We probably do, I'm guessing. But, I would just encourage that we make sure, going through this, I just want to make sure that we are ahead of the game. So when they come in, they don't, the agreement says you have to have X amount of thousands of dollars of liability insurances and stuff like that, on our coverage, just to make sure that those are already taken care of before they get here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I got a whole list, man. This is a big deal. And then I think that I would like, and I know you say that this is actually in your responsibility as the mayor and the safety service director, but I would like to throw out a suggestion that we form maybe a water commission that would consist of like yourself, the safety service director, somebody from Public Works, maybe the fire chief or a representative, a council member, particularly the streets chair, and then maybe a citizen, that as this is going through, because they do mention in here that they would be communicating. It's a 6-8 month, like you said, process, and it's going to be pretty involved. I mean, our infrastructure, quite frankly, stinks when it comes to this, and they're probably going to find a lot of things, or there's going to be some communication that comes back to us. So I think that would be a good way for us to communicate back to the people, progress reports of how the study is going, what they've found, what maybe they've not found, kind of where we are on that. The good thing is we have a cap on the cost that says, it won't go above this amount. And talking to some people that I know in the business, that's a great price. I mean, we're getting a really good deal on this, I think. So I would encourage that. I would also go as far as to say we must, as a council, as an administration, we must coordinate this plan, because this plan is Mr. Dracy was kind of asking. In the plan, as you go through it, it says that they could give us up to like 10 scenarios, I think is what it was. I mean, it's quite a few different scenarios. I'm sure with those scenarios, there's different price tags on each of these scenarios. So we must, when we do get this plan, we have got to make sure that we coordinate getting these new water lines that they're going to, as part of the plan, these particular water lines and how they're prioritized. We need to make sure that along with replacing water meters, as you mentioned, our repaving of the streets gets coordinated with this, and then we're making sure we're working closely with Duke to find out what their forecast is on work. So we may prioritize streets, and our top 5 streets may not be the same streets that the water plan says is the worst water lines that need to be fixed first. And so we need to make sure that we're coordinating that. So as we mentioned before, we're not tearing up streets after we fix them. We want to do this, do it right. So hopefully we can coordinate that, whether it's through committee, through this commission or something. But we just need to make sure that we as a council truly work to coordinate street, water, and Duke all together when we do get all this information, so we can have good plans, because we want, everybody talks about the streets, but what's under the streets is just as bad, and so I would just encourage that, so throw that out there. Thank you. That's all I have on my list.
That's it. Any further discussion? Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, just briefly, I spoke with Mr. Zimmerman, who's heading up Public Works about this, just briefly, and just to get his take on it. And he, of course, thinks it's needed. What this is going to do is going to give us, the city, the information we need to know to take care of the issues that we don't even know exist. We know some, we don't know some. I know Mr. Bonsall had suggested, what if we got a water purveyor of record from them? I think we tried that and we got vetoed. But that aside, I think they would still need to have a study like this done too, so they would know what they were dealing with. Right now, that's just the issue. We don't know what we're dealing with. And so it is an expensive plan, but it's for a system that's been neglected for quite some time, and I believe it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any further discussion? So we have a motion by Mr. Thompson. We have a second by Mr. DiNardo. I'm sorry. We have a motion by Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. DiNardo, authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter a water system analysis agreement with the City of Cincinnati and declaring an emergency. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Please have all three readings.
Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a water system analysis agreement with the City of Cincinnati and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a water system analysis agreement with the City of Cincinnati and declaring an emergency. Ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a water system analysis agreement with the City of Cincinnati and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden, second by Mr. Thompson. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
No. Any discussion?
Any further discussion?
All right. Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. DeRacy?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Item L, administration reports. Mr. Banner, do you have an administration report?
Thank you. I would like to just hit sort of the top bullet points here. So a lot of things that we've been working on. The financial recovery plan I've been working on quite a bit with the auditor, and had a lot of discussions with our state auditors who are providing quite a bit of guidance. So we're working on that, putting together the capital plan, 5-year budget. Contract negotiations, we are very close. All of the people that have been coming to the table are open and willing to listen, and we've had some good discussions. And I feel when I say we're very close, I feel that we are very close to closing some of this stuff out and putting some things behind us. So I do feel like we will be able to potentially call a special meeting over the next couple of weeks and go into executive session and discuss what's potentially been agreed upon. Clemens Nelson has been working hard at it, and I know all of the city employees that are involved in it are working diligently. They want this stuff closed and put to bed just as much as everybody else does. So there's a lot going on there. We've had meetings with numerous organizations. ODOT, we had a very productive meeting with ODOT. Bridget Kelly came in, sort of coordinated the meeting, our state rep, and she facilitated the meeting. And ODOT has so many good things out there, so many different programs that we can take advantage of, I think. We've already requested that they do a traffic light synchronization study for all of Montgomery Road to try to synchronize some lights up and look at light timing and try to improve the flows, especially at rush hour times. They're going to do a pedestrian safety study for us also. That's a big one. And these are studies that ODOT offers that are free to us. All we have to do is request them. There are some different funding mechanisms that they brought to the table. We had JMA Engineering with us, and there were some things that I think were enlightening even to the engineering group, because they're new programs that ODOT's bringing out, and it was a good meeting with Bridget Kelly there to help keep that stuff going in the right direction. Meetings with Hamilton County Development, meeting with some Hamilton County engineering people, and then we've had some different meetings with our insurance agencies, whether that's Haran or even our supplier of insurance. So talking about trying to look at ways we can really tune that stuff up and tweak them to make sure that we're getting the most out of here. So with City Hall, we're trying to clean up City Hall, preparing, as you guys are working on getting the ordinance done so that we can start getting rid of surplus material. It seems like every time something broke. If you go down in the Economic Development Office, there are 2 huge printers that are sitting down there that look like they're brand new that apparently do not work, and they have notes on them that say do not work. There are a lot of just it's surplus equipment. Instead of it getting removed, whether it really should have went to the dumpster, now it's sitting in heaps. They're tucked into all the nooks and crannies all over City Hall and at Public Works and basically all the buildings. So we're working on cleaning things up and really trying to take care of those like you would at any other business. We're answering the phone now at City Hall. We've changed the phone system, so when you dial 458-4500, they're actually answering the telephone and saying hello to you and how can I direct your call, trying to provide a little bit more of the customer service that I think all of us expect and deserve. So trying to take care of those things, that's an important part. We are working on the a new website which is Capstone Projects that's going through with a creative writing class at UC. So we hooked up with them. There are a team of 5 people that are involved in that. We hope to have something in the next, I'll say 2 months, a good website put together at minimal expense to us. We do have some money in the budget for putting together a website, but we want to try this resource and see how it works. These are smart, I'll say young people that are really interested in putting out a good product for us. So we'll see what happens there. Working on the new Facebook website, trying to make sure we've got all our ducks in a row before the administration puts a Facebook page out there. Thank you for passing that social media policy. That makes it better as we can sort of lay down the groundwork there. We're working on a plan to tune up Norwood Lateral. It's something that we talked about at the Norwood Together group, and there's a small team of citizens that are interested in being involved in that. But that's a big project. Just getting the lighting reactivated and trying to get some systems going on the Norwood Lateral is a challenge. That was one of the other benefits of sitting down with ODOT. They've got all the plans for all those lighting systems. There's actually 3 different lighting systems down there. And talking to Capital Electric, which does work on lighting systems like that, there's a lot of challenges with it. There's conduit that runs underground where the wiring has been bad and will not work anymore. So that's something that's potentially going to happen. All the heads need to be replaced to LEDs, but if you can't replace the heads if you don't have the proper electric running to them. So we've got to get sort of the groundwork done first. One of the things that was also discussed is, do we need as many light poles down there as we have? So we can eliminate some light poles in certain areas, and that's probably something that we're going to look at all around the city, up and down Montgomery Road. We have way too much lighting, and we could cut down on a lot of that. We've got to get a lot of it reactivated, but we're actually working with Duke. That's a question for Duke also. We're calling in work orders, and I'm sure there are many residents out there that are calling in work orders saying this is not working, and Duke is saying, well, that's your responsibility. That's the city's responsibility. So it was not that way years ago, but things have changed, and I'm not sure. So we're really challenging Duke to try to figure out which ones are ours and which aren't. And that's another part of pulling maps together and trying to get that stuff together. So the I got off course with the Norwood lateral cleanup, but it's a cleanup. We want to remove a lot of the vegetation. We want to look at maybe planting some wildflower areas. We want to look at really making the Norwood lateral, at least our part of the Norwood lateral, something that represents our community well. So we're really trying to put together some plans on that. And when you say, well, one person asked me when I talked about this, he said, well, what are some of the dates you have? What are all the plans in place? So, well, we're just getting started on this. Ultimately, Mr. Bonzo, Councilman Bonzo, you talked about this being April cleanup. Well, we want to put a lot of things in place before April, but we're putting together a group that will put together all those dates and times and when we can make things happen. So the city is doing its part, and hopefully we can put together with some citizen effort and get that stuff taken care of. And, meeting with the Norwood Together people, they have plans. They have cleanup plans. They have a lot of different plans that they're going to continue on. And bravo, please continue. I fully endorse their efforts because it's so helpful and it makes such an impact on our community. And just the people that are getting out there, and I think it'll continue to grow. I think there's a spirit of engagement that they have already fostered, and if they continue, which they are, it's going to just be nothing but good for the city of and then appointing a little later on in the agenda, we have the appointing of citizens to different boards. There are, when you talk about some of the boards and different citizens involved boards, there's quite a few of them. Actually, the Board of Zoning Appeals, Planning Commission, Civil Service Commission, the Board of Health, Tax Board of Appeals, the Retiree Healthcare Committee, the Tree Board, the Plumbing Board, the Fire Code Appeals Board, the Safety Committee Board. Did I say that twice? Maybe not. The Records Commission, and even the CRA committee that's there. So there are, when you look at that and you say, well, there's 12 different boards, and each board has 5 or 6 different volunteer community members that are spending their time, giving their time and treasure to us. There are a lot of really good people out there that are putting a lot of time and effort into the city to keep us going in the right direction. And I commend them for their commitment. A lot of them have been doing it for years and years and years and are willing to continue to do those, to hold those positions, because they recognize how much of a positive effect they can make on their community on those boards. So then the other part is just handling the business of the city in a timely manner. I cannot be more thrilled with the performance that John Murphy is doing as the Safety Service Director. He has stepped up to the plate. This is a guy that was retired, and he has stepped up to the plate and willing to work and really is doing just a great job, I think, with everybody. He is trying to be as responsive as he can. And then Clint Zimmerman stepping up from Public Works and really has done an outstanding job as the interim Safety Service Director and as the operator of record for our water distribution system. So those are two people that I can't talk and speak more highly of. They are just doing a really good job for us in a time where it's tough. So that would be about it. There's a lot more that is going on. It really makes my head spin sometimes, and I do lose some sleep. But I wake up early in the morning, and there's so many interesting things happening that day, and conversations and different meetings. I've really enjoyed it. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you,
Mr. Narna.
Yeah, I had some comments and a question for the mayor, real quick.
Sure.
First are 2 comments. One, I couldn't echo your sentiments around John Murphy and Clint Zimmerman more. They really are doing fantastic and have helped me personally with the first 40 days here. So echo that. Also wanted to commend you with kind of seeking out and leaning on residents who are trying to help you seek alternative methods or resources, particularly around the website. I think that was a cool idea and just a good way for all of us to be thinking what else is out there without spending our own time all the time. So really good there. You made a comment about you learned a lot about your conversations with ODOT, and you said they're even willing to do some traffic studies for free. Is there like a number, or are there types of studies that they're wanting to do? And I ask often when people want to do a traffic study, we were told it was just a conversation. I was told it's a couple $1,000s and it takes a bit of time to perform these traffic studies. If ODOT is willing to do, I'm making this up, 5 a year, is that, am I interpreting that right? Is that kind of what they told you, or how should I hear that they're willing to do traffic studies?
No,
for us?
what you are hearing is, and this was the part that was really the aha moment for some of the people in the room, is there are different grants, there's different funding mechanisms that ODOT has released, and in this current year budget for ODOT, they have the ability to provide some of these resources to communities that are in need of them. But is that a 5-year thing, or was that last year it was not available? Maybe it was not. And that potentially is where you're getting your information from, is somebody called ODOT or somebody called about it. But what they've put out is, I mean, you can go to their website and look at some of the different programs. Everything is cleared, and they made it clear. Everything has to go through the central office. Columbus, we have to fill out some forms, and it goes to Columbus. Some of the traffic studies are based on the crash data that comes in. So all of our police officers, you know, when you see them sitting at a crash site, putting all that information in the computer, that's all the crash data that OSHA is looking at. Pedestrian safety programs that they have, again, doing traffic studies on pedestrian-involved incidents. Those are all based upon, they're need-based. So they will look at all that information that the police department is pulling in, and they might say, hey, you know, we've got a problem at this intersection. I don't want to name a specific one because people grab hold, but there are a couple of intersections where we have problems. We have, you know, it's a big intersection. There's one right up the street, a very big intersection, turn areas, a lot of vehicles moving different directions, and then a ton of pedestrians. It's right by our school. A ton of pedestrians, a ton of people walking to and from the buses. So those are areas where we can ask for information on, and we have to have some of these safety programs have to be, or analysis and the engineering studies have to take place before we can actually request funds for improvement for, say, a crosslight system or some of the systems that are out there to improve them. Even the crosswalk signs, you'll see it in some other communities. You see the big crosswalk areas, and they've got the blinkers and the hazards. And if somebody's, a lot of those are based upon maybe incidences with pedestrians. So now, because it is on a state route, you can get some funding to improve pedestrian safety. Traffic safety is based mostly on collisions and things like that.
Yeah, I'll look at the website and see if there's any easy information on, there are new grants or new free or low-cost traffic studies. That seems different to how I thought it was. So, cool.
Thank you, Mr. Donardo. Anyone else? Mr. Geraci.
Through the chair, and I guess to the mayor. When you discussed the lighting reduction along Montgomery Road or the lateral, not to freak a lot of residents out, LEDs are a lot brighter than the halogens that were out there in the old days. And that's kind of the concept of cutting down on the light poles that we've got, correct? Is just because of the LEDs versus the halogen.
Yes, I'm glad you brought up that the Bureau of Workers' Comp does have a lot of different grants and funds also for safety, and we're going to work on some of those grants too. That was sort of follow-up to yours. But yes, the LEDs are brighter, and you know, ultimately on Montgomery Road, as you look at some of the lighting systems that are on Montgomery Road, they were put in the 50s and 60s, and they tore down the buildings, or they changed the way, you know, they changed, Surrey Square was put in, and so now you have traffic, you have these huge lights that are there, and then you have lights that are on the actual property, and so there's some redundant systems, and you're right, that the LED lights could be stronger.
Anyone else? Mr. Boswell.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the administrative report, Mr. Mayor. So I did have a few questions. You mentioned the financial recovery plan, you mentioned union contracts. For the union contracts specifically, I mean, I guess I'm just curious when you're going to come and talk to council about what we would like to see in them, because you could negotiate something, right? And council say, you know what, no, I don't think that's going to work. Like, do you have a plan for when you're planning on reaching out to us about that?
Yeah, there's a certain time frame that needs to happen. There are certain things that can happen and that council can provide input on, and then there are other things that quite frankly, it's, you know, you can go to you can, as a council member, you can say, well, we only want to have 35 people at that, but if it's unrealistic, it's not gonna work, and it doesn't work at the negotiation table. So there's no way for the administration to negotiate a contract with the unions and say, well, all 7 of you tell me your input. Each time we take a step, I'll call all 7 of you and you can give me your input. Because quite frankly, it doesn't work. It won't work that way. It's much like on the other side of the table with the unions. They're sitting down there and saying, well, we think we can get this past our membership, but we're only 2 people and we have to. So everything that I'm negotiating, everything that Clemens and Nelson is sitting down and talking to them about, in the back of their mind, in the back of our mind, we're saying, are we going to be able to get council to approve this? And will council actually accept the things that we're bringing to the table? And, quite frankly, it's never perfect. I'd love to say, when we bring this thing to you, you're going to look at it and say, that's perfect. That meets all of my requirements. You hit every bell and whistle. But if I might hit every bell and whistle over here, I'm going to miss a couple over there. So it's going to be a discussion when it happens.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I mean, I will just say there is a mechanism for getting our feedback, and that's Ohio Revised Code allows executive sessions for that reason to, discuss collective bargaining. So I will just say that option's there, and I do think, though, that if you're going to wait for the first time that you're going to talk to us about it, the day that you're bringing us the contract that we have to sign off on in 7 days or whatever, I think we're going to have, I think potentially we're going to have some issues. So I would just recommend that if you don't have something by our next council meeting, that you bring in Kelly Babcock and whoever else that you have working on your side to at least give us a talk of where things are now and maybe start prepping us for what we might be seeing. Because, again, there could be some questions and other things that, we're going to want answered. Many of these new council members they've not had to deal with this before, and they've not had to deal with some of the systemic issues that we've dealt with and some of the unique things that are in our contracts that most other cities don't have to deal with. And so, like I said, I just would encourage you to consider doing that at the next meeting. The other one is financial recovery plan. How much, when I was finance chair last year, and then the year before that, I basically knew kind of what the plan said basically throughout all the steps. I reviewed it multiple times. Do you have any members of council, particularly our finance chair, that's reviewing the financial recovery plan with you, that kind of knows what's going on, that knows the pulse of council, that can make sure that it's something that we're going to be willing to accept when you bring it back to us?
No, I do not.
Okay, so that's another thing that I would just encourage, especially with our finance chair, I would encourage you to engage with him more on that, or the auditor, however y'all want to do it. But I think it just would be ill-advised to bring this plan to us in the middle of March and just that none of us have had any feedback on or any ability to look at and just say, council, approve it. And so, I would just recommend that you do that before it gets submitted to the state. So, cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall.
Yep.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mayor Schneider.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore, do you have anything to report this evening?
Thank you, Mr. President. I really don't. I will just mention this, though, that we did cover the insurance in the waterworks contract. We had extra language added to cover what we have as our insurance. We have a joint liability pool, not insurance, but just to reassure you, we're good on that.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Moving on to N, unfinished business. Gentlemen, if you recall our last meeting, Mr. Moore had sent a letter regarding the CRA board, and that council is responsible for 2 members of that board. And I had given on your desk there, it was a brief summary from Mr. Gary, and also there were 2 resumes from 2 citizens who had forwarded those. So thank you very much to both of those individuals for stepping forward. So I just wanted to bring that forward. I think also Mr. Bonsall, I think you had someone as well. So what's your pleasure, gentlemen?
Are you saying we can appoint Make a motion to appoint somebody.
This is just, it's a nomination procedure. Someone can nominate and have a second, and then we vote, and for two individuals.
Is there any discussion here?
Not until they're in motion.
No, I mean, this is old business. I mean, I think there could be a discussion here.
Yeah.
Should we?
We could, I mean, we could discuss what we're going to do before the motion is made.
I'm sorry, Mr.
I said we could discuss what it's, I mean, because we're in old business, we could discuss what, you brought up the topic, we could discuss the topic, I think, in old business. But I mean, I'd be happy to speak, though, you mentioned my name and mentioned the nominee that I had brought forward. I'd be happy to just say a quick thing. So, I mean, at the last meeting, I brought up Ben Ireland. You know, he was recommended, he's been recommended as a person to sit on this board in the past. You know, I think that the two nominations that are here, I think are both great nominations, and they both bring some unique characteristics and unique experience. The good thing about Ben is that he is a housing developer, and so he's worked with our building department. He was basically the development manager for Lydia's house when they built their 8-unit and commercial space at Carter and Mills. And he's also got other experience as well. So I would definitely recommend that we at least have him as one of the nominations. I think it's just a unique skill set that the nominations that I've seen so far, I don't think other people have some of these skill sets. Andy's an architect, so just want to lay that out there. But I'm open to however kind of we want to proceed with this. The good thing is that there are 2 additional nominations that that this board will make, so to make their 7. So there's 2 appointed by council, there's 2 appointed by the administration, which we have those appointments today, and then 1 appointed by the planning commission. Those 5 will then appoint 2 additional people. So you know, there are additional slots that potentially, you know, people could be slotted in for if we don't appoint them today. So
great. Mr. Gabbard?
If I could go through the chair to the law department. I keep putting you on the spot tonight, but we're making you earn your due. Can you just explain what the CRA is, what they do, just for all of our benefit, and then for those watching?
Thank you, Mr. President. The CRA was set up long ago. It's a tax abatement. So if you do made the idea being and what we're talking about here is the residential side. For the commercial side, there's also a program available, but that goes. Every one of those has to be done with a contract that's approved by council, and then annually that goes to the Tax Incentive Review Committee that also looks at the enterprise zone agreements and some of those kinds of things with the county. The CRA is the residential side. So if somebody builds a new house, or if somebody puts a significant amount of money into their house, the value of the property goes up, and so their property taxes go up. If they file an application with the city and they meet some requirements that are really kind of minimal, then that won't be taxed. It's a tax abatement. It's for, I forget, is it 10 years, I think, I forget off the top of my head, for the residential. The CRA board that we're talking about, once a year, under state law, is required to review those, the ones that are current, that we're currently out there, the people that are getting abatements now on the properties, and make sure they're still compliant. So are there code violations, or is there somebody actually living in there, that kind of thing. So that's what the board is supposed to do, and submit a report. Maybe a couple of other things I don't remember. The last time I actually looked at the specifics was quite a while ago, but attached to my letter at the last meeting was some breakdowns of all the different things people are supposed to be in regards to these. But that's basically what the program is. And there's a lot of people that take advantage of that.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Mr. President. So basically, I want to be clear, you're asking us to appoint 2 people to the CRA board. And if I may, through the president, these are not to approve CRAs, these are just to make sure that they are in compliance? Or does this board actually approve CRAs?
Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the residential side, there is no board that approves it. If they meet the requirements, the building commissioner sends a letter to the county. So they have to. It's got to be a certain amount. The work's actually got to be done. It's got to be inspected. You know, it has to be owner occupied. There's a bunch of things that are in there, but this board would look at the ones that are out there every year and make sure they're still in compliance.
Thank you. Follow up. Thank you, Mr. President. So you want us to appoint 2 people, and you have 2 resumes in front of us here, and then you have a third. So, how did you get these? Can I ask you how these resumes got to you?
Well, I'm sure at the last meeting, when the letter was read, I think someone had sent an email to Mayor Schneider, and so I printed that resume off and gave it to you.
Yes.
As Mr. Moore has instructed us at our last meeting, we have to approve 2, and then someone else had sent me a resume, which I copied and gave to you gentlemen as well.
Okay.
And then this afternoon, Mr. Bonsall, I think, sent an email for the other gentleman. Forgive me.
Yeah, Mr. Eilerman. Yeah.
Yes.
Say that again, sir.
Yeah, Ben Eilerman.
Ben Eilerman.
Yep. And I sent that this afternoon to all of your all's inboxes too, right about the same time that Mr.
Yes.
Miracle sent his. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Braden. Any other?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we were going to try to get 2 appointments, knowing that there are opportunities for a third to become on the board in a different avenue. Is there like a voting process we could all do, or?
Well, I think it's like any other nomination. I think someone nominates, and then we second, and then we vote.
Yep.
Am I correct?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll make a motion that we approve Hillary Copsey-Cannon and Ben Eilerman as our council nominees for.
You want to do them 2 at a time, or?
Yeah, well, that's fine. I think we're going to do the first one. So I'll make a motion to do Ben Eilerman to appoint him as our.
So we have a motion by Mr. Bonsall to appoint Mr. Eilerman. Do I have a second? Mr. Thompson? Any further discussion? Call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
No.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
No.
All members present, voting 5-2. Mr. Eilerman is now part of the CRA board. Gentlemen, Mr. DiNardo.
A motion to appoint Hillary Copsey to the CRA board.
Mr. DiNardo, have a second? Second by Mr. Geraci. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes.
All members present, voting aye. Congratulations to our new members of the CRA board.
Yep.
And thank you for stepping forward. Mr. Bonsall, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And could we ask, and I can make sure addresses are available, but can we ask that the clerk of council potentially send a letter to them just to.
That's part of, I think when Mr. Gary had sent that, that was item 3 that we have to send.
Okay, perfect.
A letter.
Thank you.
To the building commissioner. Any other unfinished business before us? Mr. Kelch?
I'd like to give an update. We put together through the Parks Committee request for quotes for the stairs at Millcrest from Upper Lower, the bleachers at Waterworks. Clint Zimmerman's doing an outstanding job. Like as the mayor said, Mr. DiNardo said, he's doing a really, really, really fine job for the city of Norwood. I spoke to him earlier today. He said they're working on getting quotes for those items. And he's also helped the Parks Committee with some of the equipment that we had, and we had to move some locations of some of the equipment, and they started installs on that this week, and they're looking to have that done by the end of this week. So I think that's pretty awesome, and the Public Works guys, mainly Clint and all the other guys who got work for him, have just been doing an outstanding job on that.
Thank you, Mr. Kelch. Anyone else? Mr. Bonsall?
Thank you, Mr. President. Is there an update on the playground equipment? I know that I think you two are working on that. Maybe we could get
Mr. Kelch?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The playground equipment that we decided that wasn't all going to go at Burwood, and we're going to split it between Burwood and Lower Millcrest. They started at Burwood, and they're going to move on to Lower Millcrest to do the installs.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. Thank you.
And just as a follow-up, there will be, after the timbers are set, it's kind of raining out, so it might take a little bit. But after everything's set, we have mulch coming in sometime after that, probably a few weeks. Donna Lake's helping me with that. And then particularly at Burwood, there was a lot of talk around addressing the drainage issue. there's not a formal update. I know we did request to talk to the Safety Service Director about quotes. Prior to that, they're assessing how much they can do in-house, and we had a few ideation sessions around what that would look like, and what kind of the art of the possible mixed in with how much could be done in-house. So nothing formal to report, but that's very much in process, and they're actively working on that. So
Great, thank
kudos to them.
Thank you, Mr. Nardo. Anyone? Mr. Gabbard?
Through the chair over to, when you mentioned the playground equipment going to Lower Millcrest, is that like lower or middle by the main shelter, back behind the main shelter towards the ball field, whereabouts?
Yeah, so it's good. Well, growing up, we was always called a lower, so they're both kind of like one lower. But I think middle is that smaller area up top. But to clarify, it's going to be behind the big shelter between that and the Lower Millcrest baseball field down there. The dome climber was there. It's been old and kind of in disarray, and we've taken that out. And it's going to go kind of in that area to kind of add to the park that we already have down there.
Mr. Dracy?
I'd like to ask the clerk of council to send a letter to Safety Service Director and the mayor, along with the law department, in reference to a green plot of land behind, I believe it's 4216 Montgomery, in order to try and get something moving on this land to see if we can possibly stir some economic development back there, as it's owned by, I believe, Sorta.
Sorry, just for clarification, we're looking for a letter asking for the administration to contact Sorta?
To contact Sorta.
Okay.
Reference that land and find out if they're willing to either work with the city to do something regarding it, or if they would like to sell it to the owners of that property.
Okay.
Any other unfinished business? Thank you. We'll move on to new business. Any new business? Mr. Green?
Yeah, I'd like to plan a streets committee meeting if we could. Scheduling has been an issue for us, so pulling up my calendar. Just to try to work with other work schedules. I would maybe suggest what today is. Let's see, the 11th. How about Thursday, the 13th? Does that work for anybody? I would suggest, okay, Monday, the 17th. Is that working for anybody here? I got Mr. Geraci and Mr. Kelch and Mr. Thompson. Either one of those would work. If not, I'll continue to Tuesday the 18th. You can do the 18th, Tuesday? Mr. Geraci.
Yeah, I can do the 18th.
The 18th, 6:30,
6:30 would be better.
6:30 on the 18th?
Yes, sir.
Let's call to order. Let's call for that, if that's okay, Mr.
Will you provide?
Chair?
You'll provide an agenda to.
Would you like me to provide that now, or?
If you can.
Okay.
You don't have to
sure.
do it now, just so we make sure we
just
get
to
it on this.
clarify, sir, if I may,
Yes.
do we have to make a motion to have something in that committee? Because something that was discussed tonight as far as working with the water quote that we're trying to get the engineering plan for our water systems. Would you like to discuss that, or does that have to have a motion to be placed in committee?
Mr. Gabbard?
I believe you can only discuss in committee the particular topics that you have in the committee.
Yes, sir.
Unless it's a standing committee time where it's just like every week or every 2 weeks at this particular time. So unless it's a standing, and we can go through to the law department to get clarification on that. I believe that's the case.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Mr. Gabbert's organizational and his, getting our rules out there in proper order. I appreciate that. So he's a stickler for that. I see that. So just to recap, the things that have been placed in the committee are parking on Quatman Avenue, traffic patterns on Wesley and Marion,
And Ash.
and Ash, and a discussion on a plan for further street
Yeah, streets on it.
plan a plan to repair streets and to so we'll start that discussion. Is did I miss anything?
That's great, Mr. President. Thanks.
It's us.
Thank you, Mr.
6:30. Yeah.
Mr. Gabbard,
Yes.
did you have a question for Mr. Moore?
No.
I apologize. Okay.
Well, yeah, let me go through and
Yes.
just get clarification on rules of what can be discussed in committee.
Generally, a standing committee on finance I would say, is free to discuss the city's finances, just as a general matter. But generally, yeah, you can't, there's not much a committee can do with anything that hasn't been placed into committee. And as I recall, under old business or earlier in the agenda, there has to be a motion to place something in committee. If it's under new business, a council member can just say, "Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to place new statues along Montgomery Road in the Development Committee," and then it's in the committee. You don't need a motion under new business.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. So, I mean, I guess if that is the way that, because that's not really the way that we've operated, at least in the past 2 years. I mean, there would be multiple subjects that would get, a committee meeting would get called that we wouldn't necessarily refer something to it. However, so if that is the way that we're going to operate, I think that we should review the rules of council to make sure that that's actually in there, because right now I've kind of reviewed it and I didn't see anything that popped out at me that would prohibit Mr. Braden from adding something to his agenda that wasn't specifically referred at a council meeting. So I would just recommend that we look at changing the rules of council if that's how we want to operate, or see if there is some additional clarity that can be brought forward in our existing rules or in ordinances in the city or Ohio Revised Code. So it's just a general statement. So
Okay.
It's not like
Any other new business? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item P, communications. We have 7 communications this evening. Item 1 is a letter from Mayor Schneider regarding appointment of the Tax Board of Appeals. Would you please read that?
Dated January 31st, 2020, to Mr. John Hanrahan. Reappointment to the Tax Board of Appeals. Dear John, this letter will confirm your 3-year appointment to the Tax Board of Appeals effective January 1st, 2020. Your appointment will expire on December 31st, 2023. Thank you for accepting this position, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor of City of Norwood.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall, second by Mr. Kelch. Please call the roll. Oh, I'm sorry, discussion? Forgive
I'd like to go through the chair to the mayor. Mayor, and I'm going to ask you this on each one of these, but just what, I like you said before, we've got a lot of good people out there and that want to contribute to our city. So if you could just maybe a sentence or two of, what Mr. Hanrahan brings to the tax board. We probably, anybody that knows John probably knows that answer, but just for the general public, I just want to get away, and I know that you do as well in our past conversations, from it just being family and friends, and I'm just going to point, just whoever donated the most to my campaigns and those kind of things. We're wanting to get away from that kind of stuff. So if you could just share a little bit about each of these as we go through of what they bring to the particular appointment.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Hanrahan is my brother from another mother. John Hanrahan's worked for the city for years. I mean, he was involved with the city in the early 70s, but he's worked in the treasurer's office for years and years. He knows the tax code back and forth. He's been on this commission and brings a level of of knowledge and experience and his background to really do a good job at it. So that's John Hammerhand.
Great,
Thank you,
thanks.
Mr. Schneider. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bunsell.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Letter 2 from Mayor Schneider, appointment to the CRA Committee. Mrs. Williams.
Dated January 30th of 2020, Mr. Daniel Galligan, regarding appointment to the CRA Committee. Dear Mr. Galligan, this letter will confirm your appointment to the Norwood CRA Committee, which will begin on February 1st, 2020. Your term will expire on December 31st of 2022. Thank you for accepting this position, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall, second by Mr. Brady. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Mr. Mayor, if you could elaborate on Mr. Galligan?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Galligan is not related to me in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Galligan is a community activist. He's been involved in a lot of different organizations. He's involved with the Norwood Band Boosters as their technical and electronics guy. He's also been involved with the after-school programs. He works as a engineering, electrical engineering technician, I think, with Spectrum or Time Warner, and he has a good real good mechanical understanding. So, and he's been a member of the City of Norwood for many years. So,
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Letter 3 from Mayor Schneider, appointment Norwood Planning Commission. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated January 30th of 2020, Ms. Jeannie Sickinger, regarding appointment to the Norwood Planning Commission. Dear Ms. Sickinger, this letter will confirm your appointment to the Norwood Planning Commission beginning March 1st of 2020. Your term will expire on December 31st, 2025. Thank you for accepting this position, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Braden.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the letter.
Motion by Mr. Braden, second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to elaborate on Mrs. Sickinger?
Mr.
No. Jeannie's been involved with the city for many, many years. She was instrumental in the Ellesmere Community Garden that is right on Williams. It's the Williams Community Garden right on the corner of Ellesmere and Williams. She was there when the building was there that was dilapidated and tore down. She led the effort to get that garden established. She's led the effort to keep it going and make it thrive. She put in place and worked to get the farmers market right in that area and really to spark a lot of good things that have happened in the city so far. She's very interested in the plans for the city and where the city is going, the direction that the city's going. So she'll be an absolute benefit and bonus to the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Item 4, letter from Mayor Schneider regarding appointment to the Norwood Board of Zoning Appeals. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated January 30th of 2020, Mr. Andrew Moore, regarding appointment to the Norwood Board of Zoning Appeals. Dear Mr. Moore, this letter will confirm your appointment to the Norwood Board of Zoning Appeals, which will begin on February 1st of 2020. Your term will expire on December 31st, 2024. Thank you for accepting this position, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
May I have a motion? Mr. Braden.
A motion to accept the letter.
Motion by Mr. Braden to accept the letter. Mr. Geraci, second.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, can you elaborate more on Mr. Moore?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Excuse me. Mr. Moore is raising his young family here in the city of Norwood. Looking at his home when he purchased it, he's put a lot of time and effort into his home. It's beautiful. One of the things that impressed me with him was sitting on his porch one day talking to him. His neighbor was doing putting solar power on, and he had done a ton of research. This is a gentleman that's done a lot of research on construction. He really has a good understanding. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's a smart guy that's willing to do the research, and that's why I think he'll be great for the Board of Zoning Appeals. He digs into questions, and he really tries to understand them. So I think he'll be a good addition there. So,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Letter 5, letter from Mayor Schneider regarding appointment to the CRA committee. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated January 30th of 2020 to Ms. Deborah Carl, appointment to the CRA committee. Dear Ms. Carl, this letter will confirm your appointment to the Norwood CRA committee, which will begin on February 1st, 2020. Your term will expire on December 31st, 2022. Thank you for your dedication to the city of Norwood. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I did just want to say that her last name is, and I used to say it the wrong too, but it's Carly.
Oh,
So,
Carly.
Yeah,
My
yeah. No
apologies.
worries. Just make sure it's acknowledged so that we know. And I do want to make a motion to receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall, second by Mr. DiNardo. Any discussion? Mr. Geraci.
Mr. Mayor, can you elaborate, please, on Miss Carly?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir, I can. Miss Carly's been involved in some of the different projects that are going on with the Norwood Together group. One of the things that she got involved in was looking at the sidewalks around the community, and she's trying to come up with some plans for the investment in sidewalks by the homeowners. She has a background in project management and construction trades. Really sharp individual that is very willing to step up and lend her expertise to the city of Norwood, not just with the CRA, but in many other areas. So I think she'll be a great appointment to that group.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any further discussion? Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. So overall, I just want to praise the mayor. I think these are some really great appointments, and especially people that are not traditionally involved in city government or these different friend circles that have been getting appointments in the past. And so I think it's going to be refreshing for the city. I think there's going to be a lot of just great things happening, and just want to praise the nominations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonsall. Any further discussion? Mr. Braden.
I want to elaborate on Mr. Bonsall's. I agree with what you said, and I just want to congratulate all these appointees also, and even the one that I voted no on. I want to congratulate them and welcome them to their input into our city. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Letter 6 from the Auditor's Office regarding the January monthly financial reports. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated February 4th of 2020 to Norwood City Council. Dear council members, this letter is to let you know that the January monthly financial reports were emailed to each council member on February 4th. If you have not received said email, please let me know so that I can verify your email address and also get you a copy of the reports. Sincerely, Kelly Brown, Account Clerk, Auditor's Office.
Mr. Gabbard.
Motion to receive and file.
Mr. Geraci.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard, second by Mr. Geraci. Any discussion?
Yeah.
Mr. DiNardo.
Just to let folks know, Jim Stith did, in my opinion, a pretty good job, not only educating myself. I know President Miracle was there a few times with me on these January financials and just kind of how they will be prepared and the timeline at which they'll be prepared and submitted to us. So nothing more than I think he does a pretty good job, and I think I have a better understanding of the process now because of that.
Thank you, Mr. DiNardo. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall?
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard?
Yes.
Mr. Geraci?
Yes.
Mr. Kelch?
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye, the motion passes. Letter 7 from Mayor Schneider regarding the mayor's court ticket total for January 2020. Mrs. Williams.
Letter dated February 5th of 2020 to Mr. Ken Miracle, President and members of the Norwood City Council. regarding Mayor's Court ticket totals. Dear President and members of council, enclosed, please find the report for Norwood Mayor's Court for the month of January 2020. Should you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Sincerely, Victor Schneider, Mayor, City of Norwood.
Mr. Bonsall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the letter be received and filed.
Motion by Mr. Bonsall, Mr. Thompson, second by Mr. Thompson. Any discussion? Mr. Gabbard.
I'd like to go through the chair again to the mayor. Your comments on this?
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. You'll notice that one of the things on here is Parker's, and Parker's is a concern and something that's that the administration will be focusing on and the police department will be focusing on here in the future. So it is an area where, when people say, what are you going to do to get the city's finances back in shape? We should have parking enforcement. We should have parking meters that work. The reason why we should have parking meters that work is because they regulate the parking in front of businesses. So if a person pulls up in front of your business and parks, and they're there all day, that means that your customers cannot park in front of your business. So a parking meter regulates that parking for the business owners. So they have access. Your customers have access. We've not done a very good job at regulating that for our business owners. So we're going to be really concentrating on that and making sure that our parking meter systems are in shape and that they are enforced. We've got parking meters and we've got an agreement up there with Xavier, and basically they're telling me that those meters aren't enforced and the students know it and they could care less. So we're going to be really concentrating on this, and I say this mostly, I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk on the camera, because people need to recognize that a new day is dawning, and when you pull up to a parking meter in the city of Norwood, it's going to operate, it's going to be monitored, and if you park there and don't pay to park there, and if you're parking there longer than you should, you're probably going to get a ticket. You're going to be somewhere in here paying your parking ticket. So keep that in mind to everyone. Council members too. You're not above it. You're not above it.
I love it.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson.
Yes.
Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting aye. Motion passes. Item Q, excuse absent members. All members are present. Item R, adjournment. Mr. Gabbard.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Mr. Gabbard, second by Mr. Bonsall. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bonsall.
Yes.
Mr. Gabbard.
Yes.
Mr. Geraci.
Yes.
Mr. Kelch.
Yes.
Mr. DiNardo.
Yes.
Mr. Thompson. Mr. Braden.
Yes, ma'am.
We are adjourned.